All right, good evening, everyone. We're coming back from our executive session, and I'm going to ask for a motion to re-enter our regular meeting. Can I get a motion?
I move that we re-enter our regular meeting.
All right.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, great. So we're going to roll right into announcements, and Marianne, why don't you start?
Yes. Okay. So very fortunate to be able to spend time on an island in Maine for 2 weeks, and I brought back for council's review what that town does in terms of an annual report. And I am requesting, not to make a decision now, that council review this and Josue, and that as we're doing our goals and our budgeting, that we commit to developing something like this that works for Yellow Springs to help our citizens understand what the village government is doing. If you'll notice, they also include a report from the schools. We could include schools, we could include the fire and rescue maybe. And not everyone would want something like this, but there are definitely people in our community who I think if they had this kind of thing on an annual basis, it would help them understand what the village government does, what the other entities do, and be able to be more engaged. So.
And just out of curiosity, I know we're looking at financial software. Have we already invested in that?
No, we're working with VIP for software, accounting software.
Okay. And do they have an app to like support annual reporting?
Our current accounting system currently allows a variety of reports. You know, you've seen 3 levels of report, and there are a lot more reports that we can do, such as trending analysis. It depends on how in depth we want to go into a particular expense account or revenue account.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing it up, Marianne, because one of the things I've seen is like a electronic booklet. And so like it literally lays out like this and you can flip pages, but I agree with you. Some folks would want a hard copy. So, okay, great. Do we have other announcements? Kevin?
Do. So as part of a press release, I'll just read a couple of lines. Now in its 4th year, the Yellow Springs Community Foundation Encore Miller program is hitting its stride. Encore fellows are working at nonprofits and within specific programs in the Yellow Springs community, applying their decades of experience and working intergenerationally for meaningful impact. Well, 2 of our Encore Miller fellows have been awarded national recognition, by the as Encore Network champions. Yellow Springs Community Foundation is excited to announce that 2 of our very own Encore Miller fellows, Lynn Kramer and Tony Dosick, were recently awarded Encore Network champions. So these resources that we have here in our little tiny village have been recognized nationally for the work that they do in helping to bring the other nonprofits and other community groups together to make change. So when you see Tony or Lynn around, just go up and slap them on the back and congratulate them for this accomplishment.
Wow.
Thank you.
A true local power couple.
Indeed.
All right.
Indeed.
All right, I have a few things, and then if anyone else has anything to add, I just wanted to say sidewalk. Thank you. Wow. I'm so impressed, and looks great, and I appreciate the work. I know we're making sure we adjust a few things, but
We got a punch list.
yeah, but it looks amazing. I also wanted to mention, and we're going to add a resolution about Wheeling Gaunt Day, but I wanted to highlight on the front end of the meeting that October 15th, there are a variety of activities that start at 10 and move into the afternoon. Look at the Bryan Center lawn and also across the street. And there'll be plenty more details, but just so everyone's got that on their radar. And thirdly, I am so happy to see the block parties moving forward. And it's great that the village can continue to support those. And yeah, it seems like we're at least on par with years past prior to COVID. So glad that we're doing that and that the village is able to support a little bit of those celebrations of community. Any other announcements? Josue?
Yes. On those block parties, you're going to see a $50 charge to Tom's Market for the certificates that we bought. So,
Okay.
but just making a comment. Our team is, in addition to the sidewalks, Brian, we've completed the 3 sections of the roads, Allen Street, High Street, and South College Street. So we resurfaced those roads. The section on High Street, we put 1 coat down. The second coat is going to go on after we have a water line go down on adjacent property. We didn't want to put the road in, have contractor cut it, and then have to repair. So this is in line with the Dig 1 policy. So if you're wondering why the surface is different, it still has a top coat to go on. Mark, I don't know if you're here for that, but you guys know what's happening this Saturday, right? I want to make sure you know.
Oh, something happening this Saturday?
So, we're 24/7. So if you want to come up, I just want to let you know that we are working diligently to make sure we're ready for Saturday. So you'll see a lot of activity in the downtown area. We'll have some barricades. We're going to start preparations early, but Mark, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, I hope I can get one of those T-shirts, so.
Well, you have to make one of these T-shirts.
All right.
And so, as I've said before, the Chamber's come up with the idea that we want all of our events to be a Yellow Springs experience, whether that's the holiday in the Springs or whether it's Street Fair or any of our events. And so my daughter, what this shirt's from, came up with the idea that she's making hundreds of shirts that are just white with this logo on it. And we're going to, in true Yellow Springs experience, we're going to let people tie-dye them, put them in a plastic bag, take them home with instructions on how to care and feed their newly tie-dyed garments for the next 24 hours. And so we think that's a great thing. But it's been all hands on deck. We've got an amazing group of volunteers. I want to publicly thank the village, of course, and Miami Township, but I really want to thank Mills Park Hotel, because the new owners of Mills Park Hotel graciously have given us, and I'm not sure this is really public knowledge yet, but I'll say it now, gave us the use of both of their events coordinators to help us make this happen. And it would not have happened if it weren't for them as well, giving their expertise and as I say, Mills Park paying for their time to help make this happen and work our way through some things. Not going to say there haven't been some hiccups. Yes, Marianne, the Environmental Commission does have a booth. Don't ask me where it is, but I've asked Jocelyn and Kat to reach out to, what's the woman's name? I can't think of it. Begins with an A. Anyway, you have a booth.
Amanda, I think.
Amanda, thank you.
Yeah.
And you folks have a booth for the drug program, so that was arranged today. Lots of things last minute. Getting
No. By drug problem, program.
No. Trying to get.
We're picking up prescriptions. We're collecting prescriptions from residents.
Oh, good.
Old prescriptions,
So
yeah.
this is, yeah.
This just
We've done it in
happened.
the
I mean, I was in the middle of dinner
drop-off,
getting
yeah.
ready for the Miami Township meeting when I got a phone call from Yellow Springs PD saying, we forgot to ask for, because we didn't know. I said, you know what? It's been 3 years. There's a lot of we didn't knows. And I really do want to thank, again, the village, because they've helped me fill in a lot of the we didn't knows. And I do, so thank you very much. And Greene County has done an amazing job of helping us. This really has been all hands on deck, and I'm not going to get any sleep until Sunday. So, but thank you, everyone, one and all. We're looking forward to a great event. And by the way, almost all of the booths are filled, and it's not, there are 2 footprints to Street Fair. There's a June footprint and October footprint. The June footprint has more booths than the October footprint. We've pretty much filled the June footprint. So this is going to be exciting and fun and a good thing for the community. I haven't heard a lot of bad feedback, so.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. One other thing I'll mention is right now the Tea Party is meeting in Xenia, talking about our non-US citizen resident legislation, which is apparently rocked the state. And I want to thank Kim McCarthy for speaking as to why our citizens support this initiative. And none of us could be there, but I would have loved it myself. But anyway, so thanks, Kim, for speaking about local control and home rule. So we're going to move into the consent agenda. We've got a couple minutes to approve. And so as we've done before, we pull these off. So first of all is the minutes from our last meeting, September 19th. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Okay.
A second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Next are the minutes from September 26, 2022, our work session. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve those minutes too.
I second those
All
minutes.
right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And last, we have our regular credit card statement. And so I guess as a side note, well, first of all, can I get a motion?
I move that we accept the credit card statements for August.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Marianne?
Yeah, I have a question about expenses for the Touch a Truck, which amounted to over $1,400. So I'm curious, whose budget did that come out of? And because it's a fairly large amount.
We have line items for advertising and marketing and supplies, and those came out of their corresponding enterprise funds. So if it was a water, we have these water cups and water Band-Aids or hand wrist Band-Aids. It would have gone for that. For the Public Works Electric, there's hard hats, yellow hard hats. I think you've seen them. So those are the materials that were purchased, and they came out of the municipal enterprise funds.
The municipal enterprise, which is part of, what did you say, economic development or
The municipal enterprises.
Utilities.
So other utilities have.
utilities?
Yeah, so there are, each
Right.
enterprise has, each utility has an enterprise fund. Water, sewer.
So what
electric.
utility did they come out of?
So the water, so the cups and the wrist Band-Aids came out of the water, the hard hats came out of the electric.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then I think we are moving into a review of the agenda. Anything we need to add, modify, or subtract?
Two brief items.
Okay.
I would like to briefly say something about Earth Day 2023 and get council's approval for what the location where EC would like to do that. So that would be new business, I guess. And I would like to very briefly make a recommendation about the Tecumseh Land Trust Sutton Farm. And I don't know if that would be old business, new business, or whatever.
Let's put it under new business. Okay. All right. Anything else? Oh, yes. And we do have a resolution that I would like to add to the agenda at the end of legislation for Wheeling Gaunt Day. Okay. So, Kevin, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'm going to read the petitions and communications that the clerk has received. We've received a letter from Don Johnson regarding zoning and affordability, from Greene County Public Health regarding National Preparedness Month, a letter from Lesley Lipert regarding downtown noise, and we have an addition to our packet from Council President Brian Housh regarding Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission dues increases. And so there's a document in the packet that explains that, and that's the extent of what we have received for petitions and communications.
All right. Thanks so much, Kevin.
You're welcome.
So we're going to go into legislation, and our feature event is the first reading of ordinance 2022-24, or 34. Judy, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is repealing Chapter 634 noise control and replacing it in its entirety.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So I think I want to frame this discussion a little bit. Last meeting, we had I think, very good in-depth discussion around the balance between our downtown business interests, some of our other aspects, and also, in juxtaposition, our concerns from residents. And I think we have absorbed all that. So while, we could have comments around some of those issues, I think what this meeting is really about is understanding what the ordinance is doing, how it's going to be enforced. And again, thank you, Chief Burge, for putting in a memo about that. And then I think what we'd like to hear mostly are any concerns about what's not being addressed. Now, later in the agenda, we are starting to talk a little bit about buskers and actually vendor permits as well. But the focus of this really right now is to shore up some of the challenges around enforcement with our current ordinance that needs to be updated. So that being said, Josue, I don't know if you want to make any brief comments. We'll have Chief make a few comments and then we'll move into it. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. We have the full team here to talk about the noise ordinance. In a nutshell, it embodies several conversations we've had with residents, with businesses, and the discussion, where I thought was a very fruitful discussion that we had here at council. So what this ordinance does, it simplifies the process, and it simplifies the enforcement piece, which that's the hardest issue to get right, is the enforcement piece. So we want to give this approach an opportunity. Paige is here to talk about that enforcement mechanism, because that's the hardest thing to get right.
Okay. Chief Burge.
Well, I think the key word out of everything Josue said was simplified. So for those of you that looked at our previous ordinance, we had page upon page of restriction and criteria that we had to meet to be able to measure noise and then therefore be able to enforce the noise. So this ordinance gives us the opportunity to simplify that process by outlining specific timeframes and then criteria that we would follow to keep our enforcement consistent. Just to try to solidify that consistency with enforcement, I've also implemented a new procedure that, as soon as this passes, will be implemented, which gives very specific guidelines to officers for how they should approach enforcement issues, which include the criteria mentioned in the ordinance, as well as utilizing the old sound measurement charts from the current ordinance for a tool to be utilized in their enforcement measures. And that kind of prevents us from having to go into detail about training requirements for NCOs, NCAs, calibration requirements for the device, et cetera. So again, simplified. So, and then just to go ahead and address the other last meeting, a couple concerns were raised about, there was some conversation around motorcyclists, amplification, things like that. This specific ordinance is the first step. We're going to get our noise ordinance squared away and simplified. Those matters are actually something we'll address in other areas. Currently, we have 3 at least ordinances that would address muffler noise, modified vehicular noise, and things of that nature. But again, those other issues, amplification, buskers, et cetera, that's a separate issue. So this, for the purpose of tonight, just kind of keep it simple.
So you reference decibel levels, but we don't see them in the ordinance. So where are those living?
So the decibel levels that you currently know are going to be residing in a procedure that we have a procedure and a policy manual that obviously officers refer to for any and everything. And procedures are different from policies, whereas procedures set specific guidelines. So they say, hey, if you're approaching this situation, here are the guidelines that you should follow before you take any kind of enforcement measure.
So after we presumably pass this,
Sure.
Can we see that procedure in our packet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I'll be happy
great.
to get that out there.
Great. Okay. Other questions?
I have a question about the time that this is enforced.
Sure.
Is it possible, I mean, of course it's possible, but what are the reasons for not having there be a shorter time? For example, where it talks about the number 1, the noise can start at 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. and go until 10 p.m. Is it possible, or why isn't it, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning rather than 7? I mean, 7's sort of early, for trees to be being cut down and everything. What's the rationale about that?
I think what we were trying to do is strike a balance between the things that we know go on in the village, such as the items that you mentioned, the business district, what have you, with the needs of the residents. And I think most folks, and again, I try to avoid making blanket statements, but I think most folks get their day started around the time that these noises would be more applicable. So we were trying to just balance what we know the village has going on and what we know we need to be able to have restrictions in place for. So
I think I probably tend to agree that 8 sounds better than 7 to me, but I don't really feel that strongly about it. I just had a question about the work requiring a building permit. So you mentioned like the tree getting cut down. So do I understand correctly that this would, like, where would that fit in, or is that in one of the other ordinances that you mentioned?
so I'm sorry, you're specifically asking
So like,
about-
probably the loudest things that everybody uses
Yeah.
are these, gas-powered leaf blowers, trimmers, mowers, and then, chainsaws. If like people are doing basic yard work, that wouldn't be something you'd get a permit for.
Right.
So I'm just trying to make sure that that would still be covered under this.
Amy, you might know it better off the top of your head than I do, but I believe that would just fall under your general, so before 7 a.m., not allowed, after 7 a.m. allowed.
Got it.
Is that correct? Is there a
And also
specific?
in
Yeah.
subsection, let me see here, F5,
Yeah.
provisions will apply to lawn garden
Yeah.
care between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. We have a little bit of time if there are any questions or comments from thank you page.
Yeah, of course.
Cheryl, were you about to?
I'm asking. Yeah,
Okay, Amy, just come up to the mic, please.
I'm not sure. Trying to figure out if it's this ordinance or if it's the busking one.
Okay, this is not about busters,
Okay,
but we are talking about that under
Later,
old business, yeah.
okay. Okay, then I'll wait.
Okay, cool. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
So sorry. So is this like, does anybody have a problem with it being 8? I mean, I don't, I guess if this is the moment where we protect silence for another hour, does anybody, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
The noise ordinance would also, in particular in the downtown business district, apply to any type of deliveries and that kind of thing to restaurants. That's not something that can happen. I mean, we're lucky they're not doing it earlier than 7 o'clock at this point. But they need to be able to the trucks need to be able to get in. They need to be able to park on the street without having obstruction. It's just for a number of reasons other than just noise. There are reasons that it needs to happen.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
However, Amy pointed out the lawn care piece, so.
I don't think this would be a.
Truck backing in
I
or
mean,
out,
but
it's
anyway,
like,
I mean, we could
leaf blowers and-
parse them out. So,
Johnny, I don't know, we did have the discussion about how
Right.
in the summer, if you're a roofer, you do not want to wait until 8 o'clock to start working. If you are
Okay.
doing hard labor, you do not want to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's too brutal. So that was the earlier time frame for some of those things, and the later time frame also, because sometimes you have to leave in the middle and come back when it gets cooler for some of those things.
all right, I see Johnny mic'd on. Do you want to add anything to that, Johnny?
No, I agree with Judy. We need to keep it open to where we can have people trying to work in the cooler conditions, and sometimes daylight is an issue as well. Especially if have early morning and early evening, so you want to start a little bit earlier. So, I mean, we don't want roofers out there trying to roof at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning either, and trying to sleep in.
Okay. So does anyone want to move on the time thing, or we're comfortable?
is there any other council person that would want to see it be different?
I like 7.
Okay. Anything else? All right, well, I mean, I felt like we talked it out pretty well the last meeting. So really what we needed to resolve is, can we enforce? And I do want to underscore what Chief Burge highlighted about this is step one. And I'm very supportive of figuring out the motorcycle noise in particular. And I know we continually get feedback about that. Now that we're thinking that we can use our phones on decibel levels, and I understand there are some safety concerns, in the mix, but I look forward to continuing to think about how we address some of the other annoyances. So this is a first reading. Actually, let's go ahead and take a vote, Judy, just to see where everyone's at.
Sure, Stokes,
Yes.
McLean,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
DeVore Leonard,
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll have a second reading at our next meeting. Of course, the proper public hearing and all that. And we'll continue to move forward. So the other thing we added was the resolution about Wheeling Gaunt Day. Kevin, you want to read this in?
Sure. The Village of Yellow Springs, Resolution 2022-59, declaring October 15th, 2022, Wheeling Gaunt Day in the Village of Yellow Springs. Whereas Saturday, October 15th, 2022, will commemorate the October 2021 unveiling of the Wheeling Gaunt statue in Hildebrand Park, and whereas the statue and the 2022 Wheeling Gaunt Day activities continue to encourage us to remember and be inspired by the generosity of this Yellow Springs resident. And whereas the Village of Yellow Springs has a long history of being a welcoming community to people of all backgrounds, as codified by our village values and recognized as important by Wheeling Gaunt, who strongly appreciated the benefit of diversity in creating a vibrant, healthy community. And whereas born enslaved in Kentucky around 1812, Gaunt purchased his freedom and moved to Yellow Springs during the Civil War. And whereas in our village, Wheeling Gaunt became a major landowner while giving generously to individuals and organizations, most notably to the village. And whereas the gift of Wheeling Gaunt made shortly before his death in 1894 of the 9 acres of farmland that he owned on West South College, and which became Gaunt Park, and his instruction that rents from the farmland be used to purchase flour for widows inspired a tradition that continues today. His generosity exemplifies the model for which Wheeling Gaunt became known, and is now inscribed on the base of his statue: not what you have, but what you share. Now, therefore, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, hereby resolves that, Section 1, Council hereby declares Saturday, October 15th, 2022, Wheeling Gaunt Day in the village in honor of the man, the legacy, and the memorial he has left for the Village of Yellow Springs.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, excellent. And again, look for more details about October 15th on our Facebook page, our website, and of course, the 365 Projects website, and probably a lot of others too. Okay, we are going to move into citizen concerns. This is the time on the agenda that we take any comments about things that are not on the agenda, and we ask that you speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Do we have any citizen concerns? Okay. If not, we're going to move into our special reports, and very happy to have Emily Seibel here to talk about all the great work from Yellow Springs Home Inc. And I like that haircut too.
Thank you.
Looks slick. All right. Thanks for being here, Emily.
Yes, thank you for having me. Is this good? Can you hear me into the mic? Okay. So, okay, just doing a time check. Oh, we're like ahead of schedule.
Watch out.
I'm sorry, Judy.
No, that's for a different time zone. We're okay.
I'm Emily Seibel. I'm the Executive Director of Yellow Springs Home Inc., and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. And I cannot believe how long it has been since I've been in person in this room. This is totally surreal. But I'm happy to be here. And so I guess I'd start out by saying that your local community land trust is more than charity. we are mapping the future of Yellow Springs together. I'm not sure who's doing the slides, but next slide. Okay. And so last year in 2021, we made our biggest strides yet, reaching the milestone of 40 forever affordable homes as we push towards our shared vision of a truly inclusive, welcoming, and equitable community for all. Investing in affordable housing is key to answer the question, how do we have a say in what kind of community we want to be, not just today, but moving forward? Affordable housing includes both quality and cost, and rental and for sale housing. And we had a staff meeting today, and I asked the staff about our waiting list, because we periodically update. And between our rental and for sale interest lists and waiting lists, we have nearly 500 households now waiting for a Home Inc. house, which is a new record. And then the next slide is one I update every year based on the prior year median home sale price. So it's a point in time. And we do affordability analyses in-house to do pricing, to figure out what is affordable and to whom. And it's a really hard slide to update every year. And this year was it was the hardest because the affordability gap grew the most year over year since I started with Home Inc. in 2009. So bottom line, you now have to earn more than 150% of area median income, or you have to have significant equity to access our housing market. Another way to say that is now you have to be in the top 25% of income earners to access our housing market rate housing. I think people are feeling that. I'm sure you hear from your constituency. So we hear people a lot speculating about what affordable housing is. We hear that a lot. We hear people talking about that. But I think a more critical question is affordable to whom? I think it's important that we're really precise in defining what is affordable and to whom, because there are really two parts to that question. So our mission is really to focus on those left out of and displaced from our current housing market due to affordability, particularly focused on low to moderate income households. And while the market is rolling over our values to be a welcoming, inclusive, and equitable community for all, there is a proven solution. Next slide, please. So your community land trust has been here, I can't believe this, but for nearly a quarter of a century. Can you believe that? It's amazing. So we're going to turn 25 next year. And as the problem gets worse and worse over time, making and keeping homes affordable is really an effective policy solution. I have a whole presentation about how the community land trust model works and grows subsidy over time, if you'd ever like a more technical presentation. But the point is that at resale after resale, year after year, the homes stay affordable without needing additional subsidy. It's a very powerful way to remove land from the speculative housing market forever, to ensure it's serving community benefit while also creating opportunities for individual families. Next slide, please. So the Glen Cottages Pocket Neighborhood was officially completed in August of last year. This was a huge undertaking and our biggest project to date with 12 units. Every project we've done has doubled in size pretty steadily since over the last several years. And so we're really building up our development capacity to be a good partner. So Glen Cottages, 7 consecutive simultaneous construction loans, 5 different housing products, 4 different building types, 3 distinct project phases, 2 years to gain site control, and nearly $1.5 million in fundraising was required to pull it off. And it's Yellow Springs' first ever pocket neighborhood, and your contribution was $60,000. And look at the return on investment. For $60,000, a $2.29 million project. And most of the money is coming from outside of Yellow Springs into Yellow Springs. And so here is what the 1 acre site, infill site looked like before. Next slide, please. And then here is what it looks like after. This is the new photo from the GIS system. Isn't that cool? It's getting to see it from above. And now, you know, I think trees are on the way in November from the tree committee, and it'll continue to settle in as a neighborhood. Next slide, please. So we identified gaps in the local housing market for this particular project. We wanted to see what can we do on an acre. We analyzed all the gaps in the housing market up to 120% of area median income. And we came up with a product with tons of community input and feedback tailored to each one to really see what, and the idea was that it would be a demonstration project we could learn from, and we could incorporate lessons learned into the next project. So there are folks, units serving people making less than 50% of area median income. That's going to be like mostly folks on fixed incomes. Maybe they get a Social Security check every month, all the way up to 120% of area median income, which when we created Glen Cottages was the whole gap. Now the gap's a little bit bigger. Okay, next slide, please. So we closed on the last home in January. Residents are aged 3 to 97 and are settling in and bringing the vibrant neighborhood to life. Thanks in no small part to your support, which I know 60,000 out of 2.29 million doesn't sound like a lot, but it means a lot to outside funders who are looking for that local layer of investment. They want to see local buy-in, and it makes the project more competitive and really makes a huge difference, because those last dollars are sometimes the hardest dollars to get. And so thanks in no small part to your support and community support, because we did an old-fashioned capital campaign for this, we were able to show what can be done on a single acre to build inclusive infrastructure in the town that we all really love and really care about. So we are delighted to see a place grow in action with residents putting down roots and able to care for one another. The next slide, please. So here's just a snapshot of our accomplishments in 2021. You can see nearly $89,000 in property tax revenue was generated just in that 2021 alone through the Homing portfolio. That supports the village public schools, that supports local services. Since founding, we've invested more than $7 million in permanently affordable housing. And in 2021, we were approved to work directly with the state to package USDA mortgages, which doesn't sound that cool, but it's really, really cool. I promise you. We're one of the only providers in the state that has the authority to package loans in-house, which means we really get to work with people in a variety of different situations and make sure that, and have a lot of control over making sure that it goes smoothly to get access to a low interest loan. Next slide, please. So our work would not be possible without a lot of philanthropic support. We are always hustling to try to get money from outside of Yellow Springs into Yellow Springs to get more heads into more beds and affordable housing. So here are some of our supporters from last year. The Village of Yellow Springs is up there. And so we'd also just always thank donors, volunteers, and community members who invest in our mission. And we really want to thank the Village of Yellow Springs for your strategic investments, which really give vital lift and local buy-in to support critically needed affordable housing projects and programs. Next slide, please. And then a thing that's less visible is the client work that we do. We have a whole suite now of client first programs since we formalized the program in 2014. And here's just a little summary, but some highlights. More than 50% of renters have GMHA vouchers in our portfolio. We really want to make our projects work with GMHA, because now you can go from serving maybe 45% of AMI to serving 5% of AMI. You know, there are folks in our rental portfolio who are at a wide variety of different area median incomes thanks to the Section 8 layer. We get 5 to 10 inquiries per week about housing. People calling the office. A lot of people need help right here, right now, and so we do make referrals. Our last resale received 8 applicants from pre-approved, mortgage pre-approved, income eligible home buyers without any marketing. We gave folks 2 weeks to respond and submit all their materials. Our homes are 100% occupied with wait lists. And last year, 12 rehab projects were completed or underway, including a housing preservation grant, which the village, I know we didn't give you much time, we just came in and asked for a 5% match, and that helped to leverage nearly half of the money in the whole state of Ohio. Sherrod Brown's office even did a press release about it. It was a big deal. So that money is being put to good use. We have our two pilot projects underway, 4 currently bid out, and we have another 4 ready to go. But we think we'll probably run out of money before we get there. But right now there are 12 rehab projects altogether completed or underway just in 2022 when you include all of the different programs that we work with. And I realize that it has been 10 minutes. Can I keep going, or do you want me to stop?
I would say you could have another minute and a half.
I'll do my best. Okay. So here is a client spotlight, DJ Clean Jean, who won the VITA Award, which is such a cool program that the village has. Next slide, please. Here you can see the Inclusive and Resilient Yellow Springs Coalition. We're just getting started. I think you know our mission. I'm not going to say it. I think you know who's involved. Happy to elaborate on that later. Next slide, please. Here are the coalition-supported collaborative projects for 2022 and 2023. This is a real powerhouse collaboration across a lot of institutions. Kevin Stokes has come to pretty much every meeting, been very involved and representing the village, and we hope to have additional input. And special shout out to Len Kramer and Tony Dosick, who just won a National Service Award for their work on this coalition and supported projects. Next slide, please. Here is just a snapshot of the Yellow Springs Home Inc. board and staff members in 2021. It's not just me, it takes a whole group of people working really, really hard to get everything that we need to get done. We also just recently adopted an official diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. I was gonna read it, but I'm not. It's on our website, but it's really good. Next slide, please. We have an official book of the year, and we would love for everybody watching this, everybody in the room, everybody on council to read this book and come and hang out with us to talk about it on Wednesday, October 26th from 12 to 2 p.m. This is an awesome book that really lays out, I think, a blueprint for how we can prosper together. Next slide, please. And then this is what's next. This just mirrors the letter that I included, that I sent you before the budgeting session, as well as in this week's council packet. And that's just really showing what the gap is. We understand that the village is not going to be able to fill the whole gap for phase 1, the remaining gap. But we do ask that for there to be some local layer of contribution, and maybe help us brainstorm. Maybe we can go in together to get some additional funding. We want you to really feel like this project is going to be a big win for the village, which is affordable senior rentals. We have a viable project, and we're hoping to break ground as early as next year. Okay. And just roll through these other ones, if you will. So tons of great stuff with programs, opportunities to collaborate. LEAF listening sessions also written down in your packet. We really want everybody to come to one of those because it's going to inform a citizen-driven action plan based on your lived experience. So please help us get the word out about these livable, equitable, age-friendly Yellow Springs listening sessions. We're getting ready to turn 25, and we really want your input as affordable housing champions to help us envision the next 25 years. And thank you.
All right, thanks, Emily.
Yes.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Marianne?
Yeah, and for everyone here, you may know that council at its goal session put affordable housing and infrastructure as probably the two main goals that we have for next year. And I am going to request that we have a work session on housing, affordable housing. But I think that what you mentioned about the USDA rural development mortgages is important, and people probably don't understand how that works. And I think if you would explain just a bit about how that the impact of the interest rate on those.
Yeah, so USDA mortgages are mortgages that you can take out if you are 80% or less of area median income in an eligible rural area, which includes the whole Yellow Springs school district, just as one example, including Yellow Springs. And so it has more flexibility than traditional lending, meaning no money is required as a down payment. The term of the loan is a little bit longer, so the payments are lower. And then there's a fixed interest rate. Right now it's 3.25% annually. And then based on your income, it can be subsidized down to as low as 1%. So that is amazing. That is amazing. We're talking about hundreds of dollars a month that you could save by working through this program. And it also has lower credit score requirements than some other market rate programs. So it's a really good program. I don't think there's private mortgage insurance either. So all put together, that is a really strong program to remove a lot of barriers to access home ownership.
I'm just curious about how you all got to be able to package loans, and we can come back to that. That's just a curious thing for me. But the home buyer getting ready program, is that available for folks who are just generally interested? They may not become a Home Inc. client.
Yes.
But they would just want to get to know something. Okay, good.
Yeah, and we have a partnership with eHome America that is 9 hours of HUD-approved homebuyer education. And then we also have a whole Getting Ready program that's really focused on individualized financial coaching, financial literacy goal setting. And we've had a lot of clients actually go through that end up in a position to purchase a market rate home, which we consider a success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I've told someone that you do that, and I'm going to go back and say, I was telling the truth.
Yes, we do that.
Alrighty, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, Gavin? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Love the work that you guys are doing, and
Thank you.
can't wait
Good
for
job.
year
Thank you.
25. All right. Appreciate it. Okay, our other special report is from our treasurer, Judy Kintner. And yeah, actually, there's some good stuff to report, I think.
I know, man, we can finally move a little bit forward instead of there's nothing because there's no interest.
Right.
All right, as of August 31st, 2022, the village had under active investment $11,037,095. This represents an increase of $566,687 since your last report, which was way back in January of 2022. That number is derived from combining Raymond James and West Banco account informations, and it will soon become slightly more complicated. Interest earnings from investments January through August 31st of 2022, Raymond James, and there's a very unfortunate comma there, so it is actually only $12,737, and West Banco $76,546 for a total year-to-date interest income of $89,284.50. You have some nice looking charts in case you like charts better than talking. Brad Drager's quarterly report is included. It's extensive, it's thorough, it's it's super interesting stuff. He gives a breakdown of how the Raymond James investments are, and you can see that that's actually starting to broaden. It was only in CDs, and now we're seeing securities of various types, and then all the four-letter little acronym-y things there are all U.S. government-backed bonds. So we've moved into bonds and securities. The liquidity on those is about 1.49 years, and those are pulling in about 2.5%. As of August 31st, the village had no funds in Star, Ohio, $1,489,283 in Raymond James, and $9,458,401 in the West Banco account. As of July 30th, Raymond James account securities were earning an average of 2.5%. West Banco is still fixed at 1.25% with nearly immediate availability. Star, Ohio, as of July 29th, was earning 2.09%. That's significantly improved. It was at 0.08% in January of 2022. And the treasury rates, as you can see from the little chart there, they're just continuing a steady increase, in large part because the Fed raised interest rates starting in June. Those have come up 3 times in total, and interest rates are just following right along behind. So given the improved interest rates for Star, Ohio, which is 2.66 on September 22nd, Investment Committee at the meeting on September 22nd recommended moving as much as is feasible, given regular spending needs, from West Banco into Star, Ohio. Star, Ohio liquidity is about 24 hours, so it's very available. And then the Finance Committee will also be bringing a recommendation to council at a later date that more funds be transferred to Raymond James to purchase investments and lock in higher interest rates that are starting to happen in the securities market.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think it's clear from Judy's report, but just to highlight, we got locked into a pretty good rate during that, time where there was no interest with West Banco, and finally the market's changing so that it makes sense to start working Star, Ohio, which again, we can get money out in 24 hours. The other thing to keep in mind is municipalities cannot do anything risky. So we have a limit to how we can invest. And Gavin, I don't know if you want to say anything else.
Sure. I just we don't do full finance committee reports necessarily, but I was just gonna say that at our last finance committee meeting, we had a couple different presentations, and I feel like, at least I walked away feeling really confident in the sort of investment strategies. It's cool to see that we're not letting money sit around and not investing it and not taking advantage of it. So just want to say that I feel like things are going well on the investment front.
Kevin?
And I'm happy after reading all of this and looking at all those numbers that I had the one question that you answered at the end, why isn't some of this money being moved over to Star, Ohio?
Yeah.
And the fact that it is as liquid as it is, or can be as readily available, I think is a win-win.
Yeah, and that's something where, I think some of us have been around long enough to know that we used to be paying for our millions of dollars to be in another bank. And, finally, and it was, I want to give Rachel credit, who was our former treasurer, who kept pushing council to look at these opportunities, and we finally listened. And we've got some great returns in the past, and that's part of why we also have a investment consultant. Josue, were you going to add something?
No, I was just going to add that you mentioned a little bit that we went from paying to have our money in an account to getting paid, and so we're looking to move money to Star, Ohio, and buy up some CDs that are yielding 3%. We bought a first one a couple weeks ago, and it was a high interest, and now we're seeing them climb up. So we're going to find the right balance between the two entities, Raymond James and Star, Ohio. We need to keep some money within our West Bank account for 2 reasons. One, we need to have a certain balance to
get the interest,
to avoid fees,
right. Okay.
And also we need to have readily available cash for ongoing operating cash.
Right.
So we'll come up with the finance committee is working on a projection how much cash we need on hand at any one time, and that's based on how much cash we're using month to month versus what's coming in. And our next iteration of the investment strategy is going to be based on how we're using cash and what projects we anticipate, so that we can optimize the returns of our cash.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that we did the last finance committee meeting was had a presentation from a representative from RETA, the Regional Tax Authority. What's the I stand for?
Income tax.
Thank you, sorry. And, walked through understanding where, income tax revenues are from, where there are opportunities for, enforcement, et cetera. So that was really interesting. The other thing that we talked about that I guess, I don't know if we want to talk about tonight or if there's if we should talk about a future meeting, but the investment portfolio person, Brad, brought up the idea around the prospect of, essentially making more expenditures on the sewer lining this year while we have the lower rates. So just wanted to bring up, just check in to see if that was something you had thought any more about, Josue, or anything that, if that's something worth talking about more.
Are you talking about that in your manager's report or?
We're going to bring in a significant expenditure prior to the end of the year with council so that we can get ahead of these changing prices. But to touch base on Brad, and one of the topics we discussed is issuing bonds to finance our major infrastructure projects. How do we leverage the current capacity we have now and access to supplies and contractors to take care of work now? Because we're seeing prices increase significantly, and so there's a cost to waiting to deal with some of these challenges. So I still need to get with Johnny and the team about what projects we can finance internally and what projects we could use external funding sources.
The reason I brought this up, Council, we all talked about on the last goal session about the importance of infrastructure. And so just to name that there is a unique opportunity over the coming months around interest rates that we may want to consider taking advantage of. So just that's why I'm bringing it up.
And I believe the last time we did bonds was to buy this building. And, we have successfully paid that off. So we have a great bond rating. So, so again, the prospect, which it sounds like we'll talk about at the next meeting, is doing it now when we can save significant amounts for something we have to do at some point. Awesome. Anything else? Yeah, I think great presentation. Where the meeting with Rita relates to some of the stuff we're going to talk about with buskers and vendor permits. So we'll pick up on that more later. And I think that's a transition to the manager's report.
Okay, great. This week's busy with the upcoming street fair. So one of the things that you can expect to see this week is we're trying to get ahead of the schedule. So we'll be putting out barricades in the street earlier. So you'll see a lot of that movement throughout the week. But highlights of what we accomplished: we repaved 3 roads, took care of the sidewalks. We did the storm drains on the downtown area. I don't know if you've walked by them, but a couple of the areas were problematic spots that water will sheet over and freeze in the winter and create a tripping hazard, a slipping hazard. So we caused some dust and some noise in the downtown area, and the team started as early as 7:30. But we got those fixed ahead of the winter season. Parking areas, we were going to be ordering some signs for the parking lot areas ahead of the street fair. Cemetery lot is ready to go. Other update, I didn't get an update included in my manager's report. We had our draft audit report submitted to the state on our annual audit, and that no issues there. We had one non-compliance issue that it's an administrative issue, but not material. So we've got that complete, but we've not heard back from the special audit. But our audit's complete. So I don't know what the state special audit's going to come up, but we got that taken care of last week. We continue our search with the finance director. I'll provide, I hope to have a more concrete update to council at the next meeting. But regardless of the vacancy, we continue to do our work or manage the finances, manage the budget, and we will we will have a general fund draft budget prepared for the next meeting, which is October 10th, that we're scheduled to meet, have our budget meeting. So I'll take questions on our manager's report.
Marianne?
Yeah. So I was looking at the August water and wastewater. And for the first time since I've been seeing this, the wastewater was less than the produced water in August. I mean, and that's amazing, right? I mean, because there are times, like, look at January, February, March, where sometimes the wastewater, because of the infiltration from storm water, is double. March, it's almost 4 times.
Correct.
So something went well in August.
It rained last. It rained last.
Yeah, a lot, not much rain, yeah.
Didn't rain.
But thank you, Marianne, because it highlights the improvements that we made to our sanitary system, keeping clean water out of our sanitary system. August also, there was less rain, and so that's reflected. But you highlight the piece that we normally treat more water than we produce, and that's because of a lot of stormwater getting into our sanitary system, which I think just highlights the importance of council having taken action on stormwater districts so that we could have the means to better address stormwater issues.
Anything else? Actually, can you confirm how much did we invest in the Mckee cost of living study?
Ooh. It was a council activity, it was a council ask, council approved it. I'm struggling to remember what, do you remember, Judy?
Okay, well, if you can't find it, you can,
Resolutions.
you can put it in your report for next meeting.
Yeah.
It was money well spent.
It was money well spent. I think it's very helpful to have that information. I think it shows through data what a lot of us see happening, right? Cost increasing in our community has higher income than the region. That's reflected on our property prices. You heard from Emily that there's a huge gap in the affordability as well. So there's no escaping the economic challenges. Jerry's son, I think Brian, Jerry must have been listening to your last at the joint meeting, because today he delivered us a memo, an addendum to the living cost presentation. And what he's highlighting is, I think one of the questions we receive, well, why aren't we comparing ourselves to Oakwood? Because a lot of people are comparing us to Oakwood.
Yeah.
He highlighted that, but in the comparison to Oakwood, it also shows that while Oakwood, it's significantly larger, their expenses are, with the exception of utilities, it's much heavier or higher than the village. Just an example on property and local income tax burden, they're almost 140% higher than the village.
I do think that next year, I would like to see the cost of living study target the communities where, if you're not living in Yellow Springs, where are you going to live? So it could be Springfield, Xenia, Fairborn, Oakwood, Centerville, Beaver Creek, and Dayton.
Yeah, I think normally we do it every 4 years, but
Whenever.
But that being said, it'd be nice to meet with the group, maybe a council member or two. But I love, that this Oakwood data is here, and it's what I expected.
And it was $2,500 in 2021.
500? Okay, all right. Anything else for Josue? All right, we're going to move into old business, and our first item.
I have a question. I was
Yeah.
speak about busking, and you told me to wait.
So Amy, first of all, you don't just speak out, but I was just about to say, old business, our first item is busking. So yes, but anyway, we do try to, follow protocol here. So thank you. So yes, so Amy helped me transition into our first old business item, which is the busking guidelines discussion. And what we have in our packet is a draft ordinance that I think Amy found for us, our village solicitor. I know that we've also got the information from the Public Arts and Culture Commission. that gave us some recommendations early on. And, I'm not sure that at this point, we're kind of talking about ideas and, potentially looking at some kind of ordinance. But at this point, it's really just kind of the first stab at, where we want to go. So, Josue, do you want to highlight anything on this or?
I
think, I think, we've got lots of data.
Right.
Let me ask if any council members have anything in particular they want to talk about, but I'm open to hearing from Amy. All right, well, Amy, come on up.
So I'm Amy Walmsley, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the PACC and to remind council of the PACC's recommendations regarding the regulations around busking in Yellow Springs. I know you do have some of that in your packet. As a reminder of why there is a Public Arts and Culture Commission, the PACC advises Village Council regarding the merits of any art concept, proposed art exhibit or installation, to ensure respect for others of public places, as well as to convey the creative and welcoming nature of our community, to attract persons to the village, to enhance economic activity, and to increase community collaboration and inclusion, promote participation and contributions. The current proposal being reviewed tonight does not convey the creative and welcoming nature of our community, does not increase community collaboration and inclusion, and does not promote participation and contribution. The review completed by the PACC was done at the request of the village manager and council. However, the recommendations based off of this review seem to have not been taken into consideration. A survey was developed by the village in collaboration with the PACC and distributed to downtown businesses. Upon a review of the survey results, it was determined the communication and enforcement of the permits were lacking. The majority of businesses have had minimal to no negative experiences with buskers. Amplification and loud performances in the downtown area are a concern as they disrupt businesses and comfort levels of the public, and blocking of sidewalks and other areas by performers is a concern. It was recommended that the survey results be shared by village staff with council. I'm not sure if this was done, but if needed, PACC does have a breakdown of the survey and would be willing to share those results if council was not able to get those any other way. The recommendations for Busking Ordinance after review of the results were: information can be found in one location at yso.com and uses consistent language. The communication is clear and accurate with specific instructions, expectations to the public. This includes a map of village property where street performers are welcome. Small cards that contain the village street performer standards are created and distributed in town for public use and reference. The back of the card would include the location of creative areas. These would be village-owned properties or properties negotiated by the village for buskers to perform that are located a minimum of 100 feet away from other areas. The language proposed to the ordinance was: those who live and work within the village of Yellow Springs are encouraged to monitor themselves and others in the spirit of cooperation. When a performer, participant, spectator, and/or business owner are not meeting the expectations of the village of Yellow Springs, they may be given the street performer standards of consideration card by anyone in the community. Once given this card, the individuals are to adhere to the standards. It was only after a reminder has been given and the standards of consideration continue to not be met should there be enforcement through YS governmental entities. The card would include much of the current language with some additional bullet points, including: group performances of more than 2 people should be performed in areas away from the sidewalk where there is plenty of space for congregation, such as a park or in the John Bryant Center lawn. Busking and other performances in public areas may begin at 11 a.m. and are to end at sundown. The removal of complying with Yellow Springs ordinances which strive to continue loud, annoying noise levels and discourage amplification. In conclusion, this proposed ordinance hinders the encouragement of youth and others who live in the village to share their art, creates a barrier for an entire group of people to participate in the art of busking, prohibits any performances outside of the downtown area, including those on private land and public land, unless a registered event is taking place, does not take into consideration the work of this current commission or the work of those members previously on the commission when the initial proposal was given to council several years ago. At this time, the PACC does not support the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, so Amy, before you sit down.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing most of the complaints that you've raised. So, so I think, first of all, as I framed, and I know you had a prepared statement, but this was just a draft to start looking at things. But I'm curious what parts of the draft ordinance are particularly problematic, because it does try to clarify the permitting.
Right, we actually did not recommend a permit. We said that that creates a barrier. The PACC stated that that creates a barrier to have a permit.
But I thought you just said that we needed to clarify the permitting.
Well, that was one of the things that we found in the survey, that it wasn't clarified.
Okay.
But when the PACC actually looked at it, and in our proposal, we recommended that there is no actual permit at all.
All right, so no permitting, and what else seems problematic?
It talks about in the neighborhood outside of the downtown area, busking is not allowed unless there's an authorized event. One of the things the PACC is actually advocating for is that we have people go more around the community of Yellow Springs, and then everybody's not in downtown. So that would include all the different parks, such as Gaunt Park, various places. And so this would prohibit any of that as well.
And anything else that looks particularly problematic?
Those were the two things that we saw right away, and if you do a permit, just the cost in general. I mean, we have young kids who want to come down and busk and different things like that. And so requiring a 7th grader to have a permit, things like that seem a little harsh.
Well, and I'm also guessing we wouldn't enforce that, but.
I believe, is that in here?
So, Carmen.
So I think that, I don't think that I agree with Amy's statement. So I know we're just looking at this, and these are the parameters that we could set. The first thing I want to address is the limitation that it puts on performers. There are people here who stop through town, who are nationally and world renowned, who have pulled over in front of Tom's and started to play music. So if they don't have this permit displayed, then there is the potential for a negative interaction with our police department, right? And I don't want to see the village supporting any ordinance that would potentially pit our officers against artists. I don't want to see that. And pretty sure there's case law of other municipalities that have been sued for preventing people from performing in public spaces, ordinances, laws or not, because it's part of protected speech. And this might just be a model from another community, but I'm sure that Amy might be able to speak to that. It's really, and then what's the cost going to be administratively? So if someone's 18, they're just coming into town with their dog, and they're going to go to the Glen, and they brought their guitar and they're playing music, then there's a potential police interaction with that. It just seems unreasonable, and it seems like it could become costly. And then, someone may be being charged with a misdemeanor, like this is a chargeable thing. It seems it's a slippery slope that these things, in my opinion, need to be removed, because someone could come play guitar and have the police called on them, and the police have to respond, and then we could be sued. Mm-hmm. So these things need to be considered. And so are we going to take that risk, or are we just going to leave it up to the community as it has been? If there is a problem, then the police are called without putting all this other administrative stuff in place. And as someone who worked in the downtown area, frequent the downtown area, if buskers get out of hand, business owners say, hey, and they're respectful of that. Mm-hmm. There have been a few instances where people haven't been, but the majority of people, the majority of artists who come to do their thing in town are respectful. Yep. And they move along.
Yeah, and I think the street performers agreement has worked well. So Amy, you can sit down unless you wanted to say anything, but thanks for answering those questions. I do want to say I love the card, and some of you may know, we have the street performers agreement card, but I like the creative areas designation. I think I'd like to explore that personally. I don't know about other council members. And I also like there was something else on the card. Oh, just kind of having the process of how that works. For me, I'm a big supporter of the no amplification for buskers. And so I'd like to address that in particular. The other things, I don't have a strong feeling about. So, but I appreciate what you brought up. And yeah, Amy, you can come back up.
I'm so sorry.
Well, since I grilled you,
I will just let you know the one thing that the Public Arts and Culture Commission talked about, that is if there is amplification, then maybe it happens on the lawn here, or it happens, not close to businesses.
So that's where we could designate an area.
Like a creative area for amplification.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Siri, choose the voice you like.
Marianne?
Now I'm trying to get my computer not to talk, but it started talking. Yeah, I agree. Amplification, I think that's the issue.
Yep. So, Mark, come on up. And by the way, remember, this is just buskers.
Yes,
So,
no,
yes.
just buskers. That's all I want to talk about. First of all, Amy, I appreciate your clarifying a lot of stuff. And I appreciate your clarifying that it was not the chamber that did the survey. But what I do want to say is the businesses really do appreciate the buskers. I agree. I don't think that necessarily permitting the only thing that I could think of permitting would be useful for, honestly, because it's not going to be a revenue generator, is to make buskers aware of the rules that we have in the village. That would be the only thing. The one thing that I would say because we've had buskers come in front of our shop, now just speaking as a private shop owner, and the one busker that would consistently come had amplification. It was low amplification. I think there can be a distinction. I know we have one young man in town who plays his guitar pretty loudly. He's hard of hearing. I've approached him a number of times, said, hey, River, can you turn it down just a little bit? And he's more than gracious, absolutely will do that, because he's not aware of how loud it is, because he is hard of hearing. So again, there are certain instruments that you simply cannot play without amplification. You cannot get the same type of music out of an acoustic guitar that you can an electric guitar for some pieces. And so I'd ask you to consider, when you're talking about amplification, let's talk about limits to amplification, or ways to mitigate it, so it doesn't get out of hand, but to leave it. That said, and also addressing amplification, I would be remiss, because we do have a business owner in town who has a business on a second story with windows closed, and a block away there's someone who's using amplified music along with his instrument, and the people who have been on conference calls with him ask him to turn down his music because it's that loud. So I understand that complaint as well. So thank you.
So I guess just to get a sense for do we want something brought back? It seems like we want to address the amplification thing. Does everyone essentially agree with some of the other concerns, that maybe we don't focus on permitting and that sort of thing, or what are the thoughts? Oh yeah, Cheryl, come on up.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I have a question. I'm also part of the Public Arts and Culture Commission, along with Amy. And my question is, in this first reason, I have more of a procedural question related to the fact that the commission did a lot of work in terms of putting together recommendations that didn't seem to kind of make it to this first reading. And so my question is, what is the process for how you pull the recommendations for the commissions into the ordinance policy writing?
Yeah, in this case, it was pulling a draft ordinance just to see what another community has done, and then juxtapose that with the recommendations. But you bring up a great point, Cheryl. I think the process is, does the PACC want to look at something, and what do you think?
Well, I think what I hear, Carol, is that if we have these recommendations and they're not looked at or taken into account, because if these recommendations would have been reviewed, then we probably wouldn't be having the conversation that we're having now. So at what point were they reviewed? Were they reviewed before this draft ordinance, came before the body? That's the question.
I think the reason why permitting came up, for example, is because of our discussion with Rita about we have to permit folks if there are tax implications, which is going to relate to the vendor permitting. But I'm not sure we had reflected a lot on the separation. That's my opinion about like just the discussions I've heard.
Your side makes sense.
Right. But, I think it's very compelling to me that, yeah, we're not talking about people generating a lot of money that are busking. Otherwise, I feel like the things around, amplification and the other recommendations were thought about, but honestly, I think it was me that just said like, put in a draft ordinance and let's start talking about it. So, but without like an idea, I like the recommendations that have been brought forward. So, yeah.
If I could. There were a lot of recommendations that I think actually maybe just PAC could be empowered to create a new card. Because once you start looking at, well, how can council be responsive in terms of legislation, there wasn't a lot, because you can't legislate, be kind, move along 20 yards if you just can't do that. And so I think we sort of had to kind of keep scaling back to what is in the purview of a piece of legislation, which is why it was not meant to seem dismissive of the recommendations. It's just where that got scaled back to. So I would think that if council wants to say, PAC, please bring a newly designed card that incorporates some of these things, work it back and forth as a draft, that's a big piece. I mean, that's the majority of PAC's recommendation is what is it we want to communicate and how to the busking community? And then we're left with this, okay, do we want to put some of this through? Is it important to get some of the amplification and other pieces in an ordinance form, or is it not? So.
And Brian, can I address something?
Yeah, please, Amy.
In terms of the permitting and any First Amendment considerations, I don't have any concerns on that front, because the way the ordinance is drafted, the village manager must issue the permit if an application comes in. He has no discretion. And in those cases, those cities had discretion as to who was issued permits, which leads to problems. So as long as he's mandated to issue it, if someone applies, then the First Amendment concerns isn't going to be a problem. Okay. I'm not clear, and I'm not an attorney, but I thought it's public space and it's protected speech, is it not? It is. So we have under our health, safety, welfare regulations, the permitting process is allowed. And the cases in Ohio would support that you can permit something like this as long as there's no discretion on who's issued those permits. Anyone that comes in and fills out their application and hands over the $15 or whatever it is must be issued the permit. It's the discretionary decisions that run afoul of the First Amendment. If you start saying, because anyone who wants to do it still can, they're still going to be permitted. You follow what I'm saying? I do follow what you're saying. I can hear you, and I also need to do a little bit more. I hear what you're saying, and also, yeah. Okay. My piece was specifically, what I was talking about specifically was getting, our police people involved.
Right.
And taking things to another level and being able to give somebody a misdemeanor for playing their guitar in public.
Gavin, were you
I was just gonna say, I think I'm generally in favor of not in favor of permits and in favor of keeping this as loose as possible. Unless there's it feels like a solution. Like when we first heard about it, it felt like it was like a solution in search of a problem. Like why are we even talking about this? Like how much of a issue is it?
Well, it's fair enough and Paige can probably say something too. It's fine for people to say we haven't had any problems, but 4 years ago, we had lots of problems, lots of complaints. I've got a petition that was signed by like every business owner and worker downtown. Now, it was specifically one person, yes, which has been referenced. So in that case, yeah, I would not disagree that, where a lot of this talk has been about a very small population. But I think it's inaccurate to say that there haven't been complaints, and we've done a good job resolving it. I will say we have had citizens come, like at our last meeting and ask us to really think about this amplification thing. And personally, I want that to come back and I want us to vote on it because I think that's simple. I'm not convinced that buskers need to amplify. I understand, Mark, what you're saying. And I mean, at the end of the day, if amplification means that the drum is less, noisy, more noisy, which is an example that I talked to a lot of musicians today. Sometimes amplification means less noise. There won't be a complaint. And this is ultimately complaint driven. Paige, did you want to?
So first I want to start by saying that total agreement. I think anything that increases interactions with our more vulnerable population, I'm not down for. So, and I think a lot of our busking population is definitely can be a part of our more vulnerable population. So that's the first thing I want to say. But just like with our noise ordinance that we recently proposed, anything that would require law enforcement of any kind, we'd have to have a lawful basis to be having that interaction. And so as our current street musician performer agreement states, it says right there, like, for issues, call the Yellow Springs Police Department. And it's just, the truth is there's just nothing we could do, nor should we really. I mean, like, as you guys have kind of suggested, like, let's kind of work this out in our community oriented, like, community policing style where you guys are policing each other, and it's been effective. But there have been a handful of folks that business owners, citizens alike are like, they're just not listening. So what do we do? And they call the police, and that's where we say, man, I hate to tell a citizen we can't do anything because we're helpers by nature, and the bottom line is we just can't in those circumstances. So I think that's maybe a little clarification on why legislation got brought up at all. Not because we want to go that direction, but if you guys were to say, well, at the end of the day, the cops got to deal with it, then we would have to have some legislation. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, well, we kind of got hung up on busking, and this is the first discussion, but I'm glad we're moving forward to talk about it. So I love the idea of the PACC looking at that card and that piece. I mentioned I want amplification to come back and us to make a decision about it. Is anyone opposed to that?
I'm not opposed to it.
And then otherwise, we're going to keep it simple. But yeah, I think everyone at this table loves, the vibe of this town. And so by no means do we want to mess that up. But, again, I got 20 texts while we were talking about this from citizens, residents that also have concerns. So I want to appreciate the balance issue that we've been talking about. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the Finance Committee. And in particular, I just wanted to give a debrief about the joint meeting. I know some of you guys were there. I felt that it was a great first meeting. It was really nice to see, and Carmen, sorry that you were ill, and Gavin, I know you had a very important meeting, but it seemed that the upshot of this meeting was that the entities definitely felt that future meetings made sense. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that we're supposed to check in on here is, do we feel that these conversations should continue and are productive? We also, I think, got a very good picture of, sort of the backgrounds of where the different entities are. I think the piece that we didn't really get to have time to dig into was kind of where do we go from here? We started talking about collaboration, and Marianne, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I did think the meeting was very helpful to be able to see the issues and the constraints that the other organizations face, as well as looking for ways we could maybe do joint services, personnel, resources, whatever. I think we said that a representative from each group would get together to think about how to.
Yes. So one of the things that, I think everyone knows, we have a school liaison. Actually, Marianne and I share that role. We have not traditionally had a township liaison, but it seems that the township supports that idea. And we've suggested maybe Maryland, but it's up to, that group. But I do think it makes sense to have those liaisons work together, so that they become like joint. And then the idea would be that they would talk more about what the next meeting looks like, bring that back to their respective bodies. So.
Oh, and then did we talk about times, like we did talk about the fifth Mondays?
Yeah, so there was an idea that, what are there, 4 fifth Mondays a year? Is that what Don Hollister said?
Yes.
They are the small islands. Sanity. In the desert of the year of meetings. I will say that, no, that is the only time we get to catch up, is you got a fifth Monday, you can actually catch up on things.
So it doesn't have to be fifth Mondays, but that was brought up. So, yes.
Man, I'll never think about fifth Mondays the same again.
I've got like a beautiful visual of what that fifth Monday looks like.
Oh, man. Christine.
I mean, otherwise, I think we need more time in the next meeting for community feedback. One of the things that we encouraged at the end of the meeting is talk to the representative that you trust from whichever body, give us ideas. But it was a good conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think, a main goal is to figure out, since we're all drawing from the same well, what does that look like for our community? And also we mentioned basic income. So, okay.
Well, just for you guys, because I feel like council wraps its head pretty quickly around, okay, how do we move this ball forward a little bit? Subcommittees are kind of the way to go, so that group gets their heads together on some issues, vets through them, reports back, and then when you do all get together for the big meeting, there's a lot more prep, a lot more knowledge from people around the table. So I might suggest just that, if there's a couple of reps who want to do a subcommittee and then suggest to school board and township that they do the same, then you can.
And I think that's a great point, Judy, because I know several of us care about structure around meetings. And I think this first meeting was pretty well planned out. Actually, I had a 4-hour conversation on a drive with somebody who helped organize the slides, and Josue, you followed that model very well. Thank you. But what was neat was to see the schools were creative and thinking about how they compare to other communities. Mm-hmm. And Gavin, you've mentioned, do we want to grow? Do we need to grow? So they addressed that a little bit. The township did a great job as well. So I liked what people put together. And so I agree with Judy that we want to make sure that that those are meaningful meetings. Mm-hmm. And that we're digging into issues. So, yeah.
Again, I just want to make sure, each organization, the taxing organizations, the township, the village, and the schools, everyone had great ideas. But yeah, I think next steps was where things were sort of left unsaid. And I would personally like to have another meeting of some sort sooner rather than later, so that we don't lose the momentum of all that we accomplished last week. I think it was great to have everybody together. Personally, I think we could do everybody every time, but that's problematic sometimes. But anything we can do, I think, on our end to keep the momentum going, I'm certainly in favor of.
Good point. I agree. Strike while the iron's hot. And Gavin?
Just make sure I understood what Judy was saying. Judy, were you saying the idea of having a subcommittee that would then represent the body? So rather than there being 4 additional meetings with all of us there might be 2 people that are representatives that are empowered to meet about this and to have these meetings. Obviously, anybody could be invited. Is that what you're suggesting?
So, for example, Carmen, you would probably want Josue because finances and staffing and all that kind of stuff. And if it were in the couple of folks from school board, we'd probably want Terry and or Jacob, so that you've got that base of knowledge at the table when you start bouncing ideas. And then, yes, it goes back to the body, but those meetings don't have to be noticed. You're under the quorum requirement. You can be a lot more fluid about when you meet and how.
Well, yeah, I'll just say in the context of our finance committee meetings, which is the only other committee that I'm on planning and PAC, but the finance committee meetings, I feel like work really well as like, we get a lot of stuff accomplished. And then I think we report back out, relatively effectively. So I would certainly be in favor of that for this, rather than, especially as I'm thinking about work sessions, some of the other things that I think I would like for all council to be participating in. So in this case, I would support subcommittee versus full council. So I like that idea.
Yep. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. If we were to do that, would it be possible for say we had 2 representatives, to talk to other council members beforehand to get their?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a couple things. So one is, we're talking about maybe, one person from each entity, the liaisons, like helping to plan the meetings, that are everyone, which won't happen, every month by any means. But we also have for each of our bodies, the finance committee. And again, yeah, we need Josue and our future finance director and our treasurer to be involved in those discussions. And yes, those should come back to council so that we're like processing those ideas and making sure that, we're all on board with what's discussed at those meetings. So I think it's 2 things. It's, planning for the bigger body meetings that happen periodically, but also thinking about what we want to accomplish as a council.
But also, I think, what you're getting to is if I'm about to go into my meeting with my one other council person, can I talk to other council members about what we're going to talk about? Yes, you can right at this table. Right. You cannot do it otherwise. Yeah.
So it would behoove us to spend part of a council session saying these are the kind of things we think need to be talked about.
And that's why this has been, the finance committee is like a permanent.
But I'm talking about the joint 3 groups.
Yeah, I mean, that to me comes under that topic.
If I may, Brian, I think where I was thinking Judy was talking about like a separate subcommittee that would be like the, local government collaboration subcommittee. I think what you're saying is that we've been having some of that conversation in the context of the finance committee. So it might just be worth us, because of the taxing ramifications, that was the only context that it came up in. So I think it would be worth us discussing, is that the right home for it? I was actually thinking you were talking about a different home, Judy, and that made sense to me. I don't really care. I just like the idea of there being some subcommittee that is tasked with holding this and communicating it back to the group rather than everyone doing it every time.
Well, is the finance committee willing to take on this role and just avoid us having to create something new?
I don't think we need to create anything new. I think we just need to, again, we have those liaisons for the bigger meetings, because one of the things I think was really important, because initially it was discussed that it would just be a subset of the bodies. I think it's really important that all the elected officials have an opportunity to meet together sometimes. But, again, it's not going to be a regular meeting. So, and then it's everyone's choice. So, okay.
You're 10 minutes.
See? I would have been done sooner. Okay. Goals report out. So what I want to do with this is, I mean, we've already emphasized, we talked about, there's a priority on infrastructure. We have some other issues that I think are important. We know that we need to put price tags on those. Some of them have them already. And so as I started to think about what we discussed last Monday, I started to think about, and I mentioned this, a different format for how we look at goals. And what I would like to do is bring to our next meeting a template for how we approach that. And the way I started to think about it is we have 3 priorities. I mean, we don't have to like pick a number, but we have those priorities and we actually think about the steps to get there. So for example, affordability, and whether we expand that to affordable and market rate housing, or we leave affordability as it is, but let's say we talk about affordable and market rate housing. We know that one of the steps to get there is to figure out our infrastructure. All right, so we need to kind of think about what that means, especially if we want to take advantage of some of the infill places. We know we also have other opportunities that are not infill, so we need to look at those. But I imagine within those priorities, we think about, the kind of key things that have to happen to get there. And that's what I think will create a better structure for the next meeting where we start to align with the team. The other thing is, I don't know, parking lot's the best word, but I think we do want to have those like projects that are priorities, like the CRD, the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan. And we see those on one page and start to think about how we find funding to do those as well. So that's my idea. I feel like, we've talked about priorities for a while. Like I had a pretty good picture of where people are at even before the meeting. But my thought is to put something like that together. Judy can share it out and folks can add to that template. And then we start to use that as a basis for the budget meetings that we're going to be doing with the staff. So great to hear other thoughts, Marianne.
Yeah, I would like to work on that with you because I have some thoughts about how we do our goals more effectively.
That would be great. So, yeah, I don't know if we need to talk more about that. Okay. Well, let's move into new business. And Marianne, you're going to talk about Earth Day.
Yeah, so Earth Day 2023, the Environmental Commission wants to have the Earth Day 2023 at Mills Lawn, or that's what we would like to do. And in order to do that, we have to fill out a form with the school board, and I'm not sure if there will be any cost. But before we actually get that set up, I wanted to get council approval for that to happen in that space.
Why do you want it at Mills Lawn as opposed to?
Well, we had been having it at the Miami Township Fire and Rescue, and that space has just gotten too small, even for the last time. And we really want to expand it. We want to be able to have food trucks. We want to encourage more involvement. And also having it at Mills Lawn is more centralized. It could attract people who are coming into town as visitors as well as.
Why not the Bryan Center?
Well, Mills Lawn was what we talked about. Okay. I mean, we haven't, EC meets on Thursday, so we could talk about the Bryan Center. But I think the thing about Mills Lawn is it's centrally located. It's a really nice place to lay things out. That's why.
All right.
But that is a good question. I'd like to hear from council members or this way. Do you have opinions?
If you are asking me, and the reason I believe that is I thought the Earth Day when we did the repair shop and the shred day, like that worked well in terms of flow. So anything we can help with that regard.
That would mostly inside, though this would be outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could use the building too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any opinion.
All right.
Yeah, well, certainly having the building available is a thing, and I think you certainly have more latitude here in that regard than you would.
Okay, well, I'll take that back to EC and we can talk about it.
Yeah, but I think, ultimately, I don't have a strong opinion either. So, so I think whatever you decide, I mean, I'm guessing it might be easier for the village team to organize things here or support, but it's not that far away. No? Okay.
But I was just sharing that we typically like to promote activities here, but we'll be supportive of whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Certainly, I don't have a strong opinion about it being here or there. I just heard my name and I said, yeah, well, we would want it here.
Enthusiastic participant. I'd much rather have grass under my feet than the pavement at the township, as gracious as they were. So I think that's a great idea, Marianne.
Are you saying Mills Lawn or Bryan Center, either one?
Either one, as long as I've got
moving it.
earth under my feet
Moving it.
instead of
Yeah, yeah,
asphalt.
Okay,
That's right. Mark likes to
good
be
point.
loose and fancy free.
Good point.
So,
Thank you.
cool. And then Marianne, I think the other new business topic is yours as well, related.
Yeah,
to
so there was an article in I think it's the last Yellow Springs News about the Sutton Farm and the possibility of putting village solar on the Sutton Farm. And I was surprised to see it in the paper because from my understanding of the Tecumseh Land Trust letter that we all got, they feel that doesn't, and that I know I've talked twice with Michelle, so I know they spent a lot of time trying to make it work, and it doesn't for the regulations that they have. And I'm concerned that I don't think it behooves us to try and push them to change things that could put their organization in jeopardy, which I think it would. At the same time, this is a critical issue, solar on farmland, and it's something that's being talked at the national level as well as locally, and it's being talked about at the National Farmland Trust. I believe that's the National Organization for Farmland Conservation. So it's recognized that this is an issue, and I think it's going to take time to figure out how to deal with this. And what my recommendation, I'm asking council, is that we direct the village government, village manager, to not pursue this project, or table it, I'd say, at this point, and work with Tecumseh Land Trust offline. I'm suggesting that a couple council members meet with Michelle and maybe one of their board members to come up with a mutually agreeable process to move forward. So in other words, it's my assessment from what I understand about the issue is that this isn't going to work at this point. Putting solar on this property is not going to work at this point. Maybe over time, this is a kind of thing that can be resolved. But I think we would be much better putting our effort on solar toward Vernay and getting the EPA working to push that process. And there are other things that can be done on that portion of the Sutton Farm. Michelle Burns has indicated a willingness to help us do that. And so that is my recommendation. I'm asking for council approval of that.
Well, I think Josue should probably speak to it.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Marianne. I've spoken this at length with Amy. I spoke with Brianne and others about what is possible to do this on our land. And I understood that there's multiple legal paths to get us to where we need to get. One of them being that this easement was a voluntary easement, that the village voluntarily agreed to enter into a conservation easement with TLT on this parcel. And as we volunteers, the two parties, the village and TLT, volunteered to enter an easement, we could volunteer to modify the easement. I do not understand that funds exchange hands and that there's another third party that's involved in this process, a third party being the EPA or some other entity. So I understood that we could mutually agree to modify the easement, obviously respecting what was the intent of the easement, which was to preserve conservation values of these property. I think I hope that it was clear through the article and the presentation that the article referenced that the proposed project would significantly improve the conservation value of the land. It would add native shrubs, prairie, pollinator gardens, rain gardens, bird and bat boxes that would preserve 150 species of animals. So we've been very meticulous about designing a project that improves the conservation value. So I think there's a greater conservation value in the proposed project. I understand that there's a process that the two entities could meet and agree to a modified agreement. Amy, I don't know if I missed anything.
Well, as Amy's coming up, just to clarify, so this is not the land where we got green space money from? Is that?
I saw the 92 and the 94 resolution notice. I could not trace any money to this project.
The money that we got from the green space fund involved the Glen, but I thought TLT had some involvement too. But from your understanding, this is not the same property?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So I had the opportunity to review, the land trust responded in writing back in August, and I had an opportunity to review that, though I wasn't involved in any of those conversations back then. And they make reference in there that the solar facility could not be built as proposed. The letter references, we haven't been asked as to whether or not the easement could be amended, but, there was brief discussion about an amendment to the easement and then address their concerns about amending it. The land trust has adopted what they refer to as some rules and standards for land trusts. I haven't reviewed those. I don't know, those are not generally available online. I'm sure they could provide them for us to look at. They also make reference to some IRS concerns that as a nonprofit and as part of the donation under the easement, the uses of the land have to meet certain IRS standards. I haven't looked into that either, but the letter did say, we haven't really been directly asked to amend it, just as to whether or not this facility could be built. So certainly I'm open to, if they want to have a conversation where we are asking them about amendment and review those documents with them, or however is best to proceed. But
so I agree with you, Josue, regarding the conservation value of the proposal, and I support putting solar on farmland. However, I also, having been involved with Home Inc., which uses a different mechanism, but still that idea of permanently putting land aside for a particular purpose, that was the purpose of the easement that the village voluntarily entered into. And I don't want to do something that puts us in a conflictual relationship with Tecumseh Land Trust. I do not think that will benefit the village government. So if Tecumseh Land Trust is saying, yeah, let's work this out, but from my conversation with Michelle, that is not what they're saying. And that's why I'm asking that we not pursue this, that we get some council members involved in talking with TLT about it.
So it sounds to me like there's an opportunity to come together and answer a bunch of unanswered questions. Because I'm in favor of the proposal, I'd like for there to be continued conversation. Now, if Marianne, if your concerns are addressed by having additional people at the table, so be it. But I don't want to make a negative statement. I don't want to ask anybody to stop doing anything. I want us to continue, move forward. It sounds like TLT, they simply said they hadn't been asked to do what it is we're specifically asking for. So again, I'm in favor of continued conversation with a mutual goal in mind. And there's, money, no money. I don't, we're getting different perspectives of the same thing from different camps. So I think we need to continue to drill down and get to resolution. And if that means nothing, so be it. But I think we want to consider all the possibilities. And if everyone is willing to come to the table, if you need additional people, additional experts, so be it. But I think there's a potential benefit that's great enough that we need to fully vet, every aspect of it.
Yeah, Carmen, were you gonna?
One of the things I feel like we're kind of leaving out in the conversation is where TLT stands. The general consensus, what we're hearing, newspaper, and from I've spoken with Michelle also, is that that it's not something that they're willing to move on right now. That could change, but it seems like it might be a better idea if we pull back a little bit and see where they really are. Just because no one asked them specifically about changing the language or making, a consideration for solar doesn't, I don't know. I feel like we're talking about this and there's no representatives from the Tecumseh Land Trust here. We don't have kind of any official feedback except for the letter that we got. And I feel like we need to have more people at the table.
Gavin, were you going to say something?
No, I mean, I don't think I have a strong opinion about it. I think I probably agree with what Carmen's saying. The hard part about this is while I appreciate you talked to, multiple people have said they talked to people. I guess it just feels a little weird. Like, can we just have a meeting and have the things that were said all be said in one place? And then if it's.
And that's what I'm suggesting. I don't know that we want to do that at a council meeting.
Sure. Well, I
But
think,
that we could have a couple council members and Josue meet with whomever they need to at the Tecumseh Land Trust.
all right, I'd like to be at that meeting. And then Mary Ann, it seems like you'd like to be there.
Okay.
And Josue, are you good?
And I would love an opportunity to do a full presentation.
Okay.
With all the charts and everything that we have. I don't think that that's going to be the winning argument, because I think that they get what we're trying to do. I think everybody
Yes.
gets that we are at a crisis, right? Climate action and in improving conservation values. I don't think that that's the issue at hand. Obviously, I have a great presentation to go with it, but I would like to make a presentation, and I think at the end of the day is what are the legal ways that we can modify an agreement so that we could do what we need to do. What we want to do on this property.
So, like, would it be appropriate to ask Amy to come?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that, and then ask them to invite an attorney out there if they, I don't know if they have representation, so that.
There's
Basically trying to
several
avoid-
attorneys on that board.
Great, okay, so whoever, but I mean, there's a difference between being an attorney and having expertise about this particular issue, so.
So I think I think we're on the same page. Let's pull it back, let's have a conversation, and then, like Gavin said, let's hear all the stuff that's been said together, and then we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're into future agenda items. We have got plenty as we get into the last quarter of the year. Anything else that is not on the current list that people, Gavin?
Well, I think we got an email about the public safety philosophy work session after this came out. So I just want to take this opportunity just to say that Judy and I have started, Judy said, hey, Gavin, what would be on the agenda? And I wrote a word mess of like, here are things that might be on an agenda. So I'm just opening it up to you all. If you have things that you would like to be considered on the agenda, and in part, Paige isn't here anymore, but Josue, if you'd like to ask Paige if there are things that Paige would like to have on the agenda, if it's appropriate, I could continue to take the lead on working with Judy to try to hone an agenda. And I think there also will likely be some prep work, not an extensive amount, but like some questions for people to think about so that we come in and have as productive as a conversation as possible when we get together.
And then, it sounds like we're also wanting to set up a housing work session. And, again, with the idea that I think we are thinking about affordable and market rate based on the overall, what I heard last week.
For the bit with Gavin, that I think you have enough on your plate that should probably not be contemplated until about January. And setting something up in January at this point is usually fairly doable. You're looking several months out, and people tend to have
For the public
more
safety work
open-
session?
No, for housing. You're set on public safety because, you're December 1, 3 to 5, I do believe. everybody check your email, because that's not okay. You want to let me know ASAP.
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
I would like
Yes.
to take some time off in October. I was looking at the 22nd, week of the 22nd will be a week. It's within the parameters of the 10 days.
Yes.
So
Do it, man. Take off.
Oh, and also, goals template for next time and bonds projects. I threw them on the list. We can go over it in agenda planning.
Sounds good. Okay, and just, I guess I should mention, the next meeting, October 17th, I have to Zoom in. So Kevin and I will discuss, but since I won't be here present, I might have Kevin chair the meeting. I think that makes more sense. But I will be participating from DC, so, all right.
You'll have fun.
It's work,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I have something that I would like to have, to be able to discuss with council and staff, and I'm not sure how to move it forward. I've been thinking a lot about how we could be more effective in terms of how we organize ourselves. And there are lots of different ways we could do that. And so I don't know whether it makes sense for me to write up something and put it in a council packet, or maybe, or have a, and then if people agree, have a work session, I'm not sure. Or Brian, I could talk more with you.
Is this
or-
related to council committees?
Yes, and
Okay,
more
because
than
I
that.
think a starting point is to pull that report back that never got presented to council. So, yeah. So maybe we look at that together and then
Okay.
go from there. Cool. That would be great. The Committee on Committees reports. Okay.
It's getting deep.
All right. Well, I think with that, so we're not going to adjourn the meeting yet because we're going to move back into executive session. So I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session, again, for the purpose of discussion of a public official.
I move.
I second.
Okay. All those in, well, let's go ahead and call the roll. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Brown, DeVore Leonard,
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. And while we're clearing the room, if anyone wants to grab water or anything.
See you on Saturday.
All right. Yes. All right. Rock and roll.
And Brian?